Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So I'd wager that probably most of you have gotten your hands on some of the seasonal weaponry by this point. I'd also wager, especially if you've kept up with the seasonal story, that that includes the new legendary glaive called Judgment of Kel'Garath. But who was Kel'Garath, and what makes this particular blade, the glaive, so special? Well, of course, we faced off against him in the weekly story from the second mission of the season, but there's actually a lot more to him than you might first have known. I won't lie to you though, this story is going to cover Kel'Garath, but he's a lot less special than the glaive that bears his name. Why? Because Kel'Garath is a massive loser, who was given every possible chance a hive could get and still failed practically every single time. It's actually such a comically large number of failures that I'm not so sure that Xivu Arath didn't plan for some of this, and I'll explain my thoughts on that later in the video, but that's the main takeaway I want you to get from all of this. Kel'Garath probably has a free timeshare inside a school locker, or the hive's equivalent thereof. So yeah, let's talk about Kel'Garath and the lore surrounding him, and the new glaive, the Judgment of Kel'Garath. Some of you might actually remember him as a reoccurring minor villain in the Season of the Lost. He served Xivu Arath's hive forces, but he was originally a member of Savathun's brood. He was so ashamed of Savathun's betrayal that he went deep into the Hellmouth to a place called the Serration Beds, appropriately named because he then proceeded to scour off his armor until there was no trace left of the red coloration that designated him as loyal to Savathun, and thus he could pronounce his loyalty to a new god. He was not happy about Savathun turning to the light, just in the same way that many hive weren't. His dedication, however, got him noticed, and this is perhaps one of the few moments in which Kel'Garath's story is actually on a rise. Kel'Garath, risen from bones as he was called from then on, pledged himself to Xivu Arath, and would proceed to hunt Guardians, Techeuns, and other awoken forces throughout the system, and in particular in the Ascendant Plane. But when he had to go after us, it seems clear that he bit off more than he could chew. We first faced him in the story mission at the beginning of the Season of the Lost, and he was the final boss of that mission. Does anyone remember that? I made sure to remember it. I don't think anybody else did. I can't really blame you though. I mean, he's on screen for a tiny amount of time, it's fairly quickly one and done, and he is the kind of boss that might have died so quickly that you didn't notice his name under the bright flashes of your Nova Bomb, or Thunder Crash, or Primary Weapon Fire. He's really not that intimidating in this context. In a further attempt to prove himself, Kel'Garath then came and hit back at us, leading an incursion into the vault where the Queen of the Reef had stored the exotic trace rifle Arga's Scepter. It's here that we fought, and yeah, he once again got his ass whooped. We had the new weapon on hand, and he was experiencing its might firsthand. Needless to say, this did not end well for Kel'Garath, and once again, there was no victory for Risen from Bones. Now, I think it should be highlighted at this point that Kel'Garath has been given a lot of chances already as a hive. Most of the time, your first failure is enough. Remember that the hive value the sword logic, and they state that when something has failed to prove its own strength, it should not exist. Seriously, that's the hive doctrine. It's pretty brutal. But Kel'Garath got another chance, and a chance to score not only a victory against the Guardians that had defeated him twice now, but also an ultimate symbolic victory. If he could simply disrupt the ritual that the Queen of the Reef and her Techeuns were trying to conduct, so that they could sever Savathun from her worm, he would not only serve Xivu Arath's great purpose, but he could strike directly at his old master, proving his loyalty once and for all. But as we know well, this is not what happened. Our fire team fought alongside Saint 14, Mara Sov, and the Techeuns, and a healthy number of awoken Corsairs, and we were able to hold back Kel'Garath's forces and defeat him for a third time. By the way, if you're wondering at this point how Kel'Garath has survived this many times, I have to presume that he's high enough in the Hive's ranking that he's created his own throne world. Granted, this is nothing like a throne world as we might see in Savathun, Crota, or Oryx's case. This is probably more like a Mindbender or Toland throne world. probably just a small spit of land that can barely build anything. It's one of those moments at which you realize as well, with all the times that Kel'Garath is, well, being destroyed by us in combat, he's probably not going to get to build a bigger throne world than that. Either way, as it turns out, instead of being finally defeated and getting the message that, how many times do we need to teach you, old man, you need to sit this one out, Kel'Garath was given yet another 4th chance by Xivu Arath. It's here that we get to the story of the current season and the story of the glaive, and it's here that I want to read some lore for you. It's worth remembering that you're guaranteed a drop of this glaive after you kill Kel'Garath in the story mission for the Season of the Seraph. This is the story mission where you go to recover Charlemagne, or the fragment of it. And this guaranteed drop is actually written into the lore. The lore entry contains notes of this particular victory of ours, as well as a large section of Hive inscriptions that was translated by Osiris for the Haka Foundry engineers that built the glaive. It reads as follows. Haka Foundry Rebuild 001. Designation: Experimental Project, Vanguard Clearance Approved. Work: New haft bound in dampening weave. Blade reset with reinforced tang. Sharpening not needed. Emitter fitted and recalibrated. Grip and housing reconstructed to meet human anatomy. Dark Blade Core 1 retrieved from on-site by Guardian Operator. Hive inscriptions decoded by Operator Osiris. Translations of experimental record imprint as follows. A black flame projection of Xivu Arath fills the Martian cavern. Below her, Kel'Garath's broken blade rests atop a ritual altar. Both are inlaid with runes caked in dried blood, layered like stratum. An ornately adorned wizard presides over the communal ceremony. They motion to the blade. This one has failed you many times. The cavern quakes with Xivu's whispered reply. Ruin births renewal. She reaches through her projection and coaxes the blade into the air, then cleaves hefts of the heavy hive metal from the weapon. What remains is a dark slither, an imitation of Xivu's black edge. As victory's hammer shapes, so does failure's chisel. The blade is reforged, a razor of painless edge and subtle ends. Worth shall be measured. Xivu Arath twists her claws. A haft condenses from swirling soul fire into solid stone and bonds to the blade. By her voice, the weapon is anointed. And judgment passed. At her command, a tear into the Ascendant Plane bursts open before her. Kel'Garath steps from the portal. What can this humble servant offer death? The cavern fills with her answer. Claim Mars. Possess the Warmind. Kel'Garath barely recognizes the blade he once pledged to Savathûn, now remade as he has been. He grips it, and in his grasp it sprouts into a wicked axe, caught by a sliver of Xivu Arath's might. Rise, Kel'Garath, Darkblade. Now, needless to say, we faced off against Kel'Garath, and we beat him. It's clear that the core of his mighty axe is now the core of our mighty glaive, and it's clear that it did him absolutely no good in his quest to finally prove that he was worthy. So yeah, that's 0 for 4 now, Kel'Garath. You want to sit the next one out? 2 final thoughts here. If Kel'Garath is dead, and the core of his axe is now the core of our glaive, then that means that we're setting a bit of a trend here, and it means that we are wielding a little of the War God's own power against her. This is pretty fitting again, as it seems to be the origin of all legendary glaives in the game so far, that they have some tie-in with a disciple of the Witness. Take a look at Lubre's Ruin and the Enigma, which are both either designs stolen from Rook, or they are literally his original glaive. It appears that Nezarek's Whisper is a glaive that is named after Nezarek, yet another disciple of the Witness, and may have been used by him at some point, although that last bit is unconfirmable. This would make the Judgment of Kel'Garath a fourth glaive that has taken its power directly from that of the Witness's disciples. It's taken the might of the Hive God of War, who seems to be the Witness's major commander in the field, and has stuffed it all into a new glaive that we can use to decimate our foes. This is really fitting, because glaives in the lore seem to all be tied into this idea of darkness, with the exception of the exotic ones, but even then, those designs were being developed originally with the inspiration left from Rulk. This is really awesome to see, because if this trend line continues, we can guess where future glaives are going to come from. I don't know about you guys, but I'm waiting for a raid glaive that's tied to Callus in Lightfall that has stasis or strand or something. That'd be really interesting to see. Secondly, I think it's worth remembering that Xivu Arath is a master planner and strategist. I think that there has to be a very good reason for Xivu Arath to see us conducting a bloody war with a weapon that uses some of her power. You heard me right there. I think she intended for this to fall into our hands. Whilst it's possible that we did just send Kel'Garath back to school again, I think it's also possible that Xivu meant for us to have this glaive. After all, remember that she tends to base her powers on war no matter where it comes from, and if we are indeed a deadlier combatant than Kel'Garath, perhaps it's only logical that we would then take this and empower her with our own work of war. And also, remember those words that she uttered. Ruin births renewal, a victory's hammer shapes, so does failure's chisel. And to be honest, that's also something worth talking about really quickly, because I think it has more than just one meaning. It's not just describing Kel'Garath, it's a description generally of how our failures are the biggest lessons we can learn from. But also, there is a little bit of Hive history bound up in the very specific use of words there. You see, a hammer and a chisel are mentioned, and it's noted back in the Book of Sorrow that Oryx's Dreadnought is being built in the 42nd entry in the Books of Sorrow, I believe, and it's said that Oryx uses the hammer of Xivu Arath and the chisel of Savathûn to help shape the vessel that would become his throne world. Xivu Arath knows and thinks of her sister when she thinks of failure, and she thinks of Kel'Garath in that way too, given not only that he has failed, but also that he was once a servant of the Witch Queen. So it's all very appropriate there, that she talks about the hammer shaping victory, the hammer being her own weapon. All I'll say here is that perhaps Xivu Arath understands that failure will teach Kel'Garath and make him deadlier. But it's also entirely possible that she has her sights set on a different avatar of war, us, and that she knew this glaive would be delivered into our hands, and that we would use it to honor her in a better way than Kel'Garath ever could. Because once again, I emphasize this point, Kel'Garath is a loser. And thus I dub him Kel'Garath the Useless. But that's all from me for today. If you did enjoy this video, go ahead and leave a like. If you want to come along for more of the Destiny content, hit subscribe. We're nearly at 1 million. 1 million subscribers. It's so exciting to see those numbers tick along. I think we will get there before Lightfall, but who knows? There is always the possibility that we sit there and jump up in those first few opening days, but either way, it's really exciting as we get closer to that big number. Of course, if you want more Destiny content and want to let me know what you want to hear about, let me know down below in the comments section. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per Audacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.